What's going on, everybody? My name is Tenebris, and for today we are going to be talking about what can be coming in 2020 for Generation Zero. I feel like 2020 will be a massive year for this game, and there is a lot of things that are already on the horizon that we can talk about. So we're going to be getting into this video talking about some of the things that we know will be coming, and then talking about some of the things that I would like to see in the year of 2020. So let's just get started here. So the horizon of Generation Zero is filled with so much potential, just as much potential as when this game launched. That's one of the most excellent things about this game, is the fact that it has the potential to become something truly incredible, and I feel like in 2020 we will see even more steps in that direction. So throughout 2020 we have the potential of seeing things like new enemy classes and new enemy variants. We have the potential of seeing map expansions and map development on the mainland, new missions, and so much more. So for the first thing that I'd like to talk about would be the potential of a new enemy class. So the new enemy class you can find in FOA 4. And in FOA 4 you'll find this massive tank, and I'm kind of dubbing it the Eclipse class myself personally until we find out a particular developer designated name for this guy. But the Eclipse class looks to be one of the most heavily armored machine variants that we will see in the world. Some people have talked about this potentially being a boss type enemy, but for me I would like to see this design and use of machines get applied to an entirely new class of machines. So far we have 4 tiers of machines, and I think it would be awesome to see this Eclipse variant be the tier 5 that we see in the game for runners, hunters, tanks, and harvesters, and potentially even seekers. One of the big community requests has been to have a seeker that is an actual combat opponent, and I think that if we were to get this tier 5, it would be super cool to see some sort of heavily armored seeker with maybe like dual machine guns or something like that attached to it. For the next thing that we possibly could see this year is the introduction of crafting stations. I've covered these guys in major depth over the span of the last year, but I really think that crafting would be one of the best things introduced into Generation Zero. It would add a completely new gameplay loop, and it would just be a lot of fun and a further way to immerse yourself into this game. If you want to see my video detailing crafting stations in depth, I'll have that linked in the description down below. So the next thing that we could potentially see come to the game would be new wildlife and new animals to populate the map. So what we currently have in the game are just birds that will occasionally fly around and serve as fun little bits of target practice for you. But what we could potentially see are more animals come to the world to make the world feel a little bit more alive. One of the main things about the machines is that it's never been stated that they were in a kill all living things kind of mode, but more so that they were just designed to kill people. So potentially we could see new animals come to the game, and from a little bit of information that maybe I shouldn't be privy to, I know that the developers have been working on rabbits to potentially populate the world. And I think that that would be great, because then we would have a source of wildlife up in the skies and a source of small wildlife down in the kind of ground. Also, with all of the forests and all of the woodland areas that you can find across the map, rabbits would just feel incredibly fitting in the world. But I also think that it would be cool to see larger animals potentially, but you never know what's going to be coming down the line with wildlife and animals. Just that it is something that the developers have been interested in, and also it's something that the community's requested. So the next thing that we might see in 2020 is potentially further map developments similar to what we saw on the Archipelago region in the beginning of the game. This happened much earlier on in 2019, and I believe that the dev team has been steadily working towards giving a similar facelift to the rest of the map over the span of this year. This is something that we might not potentially see in 2020, but is definitely something that I believe is down the pipeline, just simply because certain parts of the map can feel a little lacking in comparison to the Archipelago and in comparison to Himfall Island and everything like that. But with Himfall Island, we were able to see the team go absolutely ham with the environmental storytelling, and I think that if a similar amount of TLC was brought to the mainland, we could wind up with an incredibly interesting map to explore that would be kind of like endlessly interesting to exist in here in Generation Zero. So for the next thing, it kind of ties into what I was just talking about for giving the map a bit of a facelift. But one of the things that I think would be awesome to see in 2020 would be seeing some of the mysterious locations in Generation Zero get an explanation. There are a number of locations from Normira Artillery Base to various little locked off bunkers across the map to locked doors inside of pre-existing bunkers, and all of those locations are incredibly interesting and incredibly mysterious, and I think it would be super cool to have the veil lifted on some of those locations and have an explanation as to what's behind some of those locked doors, an explanation as to what's behind the locked bunkers and potentially missions to go alongside it, and just a further flushing out of some of these locations that we've already visited here in the game. Another thing that we could see potentially get flushed out in the span of 2020 are the prestige points that came along with the challenges. The developers had mentioned when challenges were first introduced that prestige points would be serving a further purpose in the game, outside of just being a bragging rank. So it would be really interesting to see what can come from prestige points. With the introduction of NPCs in Alpine Unrest, I think that there is a lot of potential to see the prestige points become potentially a bartering system with NPCs, or could potentially just be something to utilize for skins and cosmetics for your character in game. But I think that it would be really interesting to see the prestige points get flushed out and see what the developers have planned for those prestige points over the span of 2020 here. So lastly here, we're going to talk about some of my inner wishes to see for Generation Zero here. And the first thing that I would like to see potentially get hinted at over the span of the year, or potentially have the developers consider, would be base building. I really feel like crafting and base building would be two things to flush this game out and make it a sort of experience that you could play endlessly. A game that would live well past its lifespan. So for base building, we saw something that might have been a step in the direction of that during Alpine Unrest. With the final mission of Alpine Unrest, you're tasked with kind of fortifying the Beertonet Hotel and placing barricades on the windows and various fortifications around the building. So I think that that is an excellent step in the direction of what I imagine for base building here in Generation Zero. The opportunity to fortify a location and turn it into your own kind of defensive chamber, your own safe place in the map. The character has existed in Generation Zero now for months, just couch hopping the entire time, and I think that it would be super cool to see the character finally plant their roots and have a solid base to call their home here in Generation Zero. Another kind of selfish want that I think would be super cool to see come to Generation Zero would be more experimental weapons. I think it would be super sick to see an experimental variant for all of the weapons in the game. But for me and myself, one of the things that I would love to see is a Magnus with an experimental variant. I plan on doing a video on what experimental variants could look like for the other guns in the game, but for the Magnus itself, I think it would be super cool to see a gun with a crazy amount of knockback to it, a stagger rate of like almost 100% from the Magnus itself. So you guys can look forward to a video on future experimental weapon ideas from me in the very near future. And then lastly, as my final selfish wish for 2020 is more crouching animations. Give your boy more crouching animations. I cycle through the same 2 crouching animations for all of my videos, and it would be super sick to get maybe a 3rd one thrown in the mix, maybe like 3 or 4, you know, something like that, so that way I can just do my crouching thing all across the map with a whole bunch of character to it. But there you guys go. Just some things that are on the horizon, some things that are potentially coming down the pipeline for Generation Zero in 2020, and some things that I would like to see come to the game in 2020. I would love to hear what you guys would like to see come to the game down in the comments below. So if there's any wishes that you guys have, post a comment about it, and who knows, I might even make a video on it if it's good enough. But for now, I've been Tenebris, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then, peace.